Welcome back to the Life Well Led podcast. Today we're talking about dysfunction, but I want you to roll with me here, okay,
Okay.
Karen?
Okay.
How about thinking of it this way? Dysfunction in organizations or families or even in individuals, dysfunction is not really dysfunction at all.
What is it?
It's actually that's exactly it. It's not at all. It's actually a perception issue. Listen,
Ah,
there is no such thing as a dysfunctional organization, person, or individual because every one of them is perfectly aligned to achieve the results they currently get.
okay. Okay. I'm tracking. That makes sense. You are a product of your system.
Exactly. Yes. Like, that's a good reference to James Clear's book Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
You read that before I did. You got me onto it. Absolutely love it. I mean,
Great book.
what do you think about the idea that, you are a product of the systems that you're a part of and created, whether it's consciously or not?
Yeah. So in the book, James Clear goes into the fact that we're made up of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of systems in our life. And if we want to change the results that we're seeing in our life, then we have to change one, if not multiple systems in order to get a different outcome.
Right. And it's a great read. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend you do. But to the point, right, is that before you got to those changes that you make down the line. And those are important because that's
Yeah.
adaptability in the end of the day. That's being able to adapt and change and have what impact that you do to be able to make progress over time. It's not you get there and you're done. It's you
Right.
have to continuously do it. But to that point, any individual, any family, or a full on organization is a byproduct of the systems that are in place in the first place, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So think about it from the individual level. What would be a good example then of an individual system that maybe is perceived as dysfunctional for some person?
This reminds me so much, brings me back to the days where I was doing a lot of weight loss coaching.
Mm-hmm.
So I was working with a coach and she made me report how much I weighed every time we checked in. So once a week. And I was weighing myself every day. And, we started off with the fact that the number on the scale is a fact. It is a neutral fact. It has no emotion or thoughts tied to that number. It is just a neutral number, right? But that number meant something to me. It meant that, when I first started, that number meant, oh my gosh, how disheartening. How did I let myself get this bad? And really feeling all of the feelings around anger and frustration and sadness, right? And she said, to somebody, they're elated when they saw that number.
Right.
And to your point, that makes me think, yeah, because at that moment, maybe they were starting from a different point and their new system or their system is creating that result. So that number that's extremely disheartening to me is actually a huge win for someone else.
Yeah, look, it's this. You're a byproduct of the system that you have, and it's amazing to think that objective fact, that neutral fact, is totally different to different people. Whether it's somebody who is trying, whether they have exercise habits, mindset changes, but the other person might be, like you said, very disheartened by that number.
Yeah.
But to the point of it's achieving the results you currently get, right? You may not even realize or be even consciously aware of how you eat,
Yep.
how you move every single day, how you approach that, whether you ignore it or you're disheartened by it or you're angry by it. You may not be consciously aware of just all these little micro habits, like we were talking, that get you to that point. Like
Yeah.
those things that you're doing, conscious or not, are achieving the results that you currently are. You're not dysfunctional. It's actually serving something else. There's something that's being served. It just may not be what you want it to be serving.
Yeah, for me, it was the emotional security blanket.
Mm-hmm.
It was the not having to face reality and eating my feelings that I was not facing. And that's how it was serving me. The system was working perfectly to align with what I wanted to do, which was to use food as a comfort. But it's interesting because you put it in this perspective. And there was at some point realizing that this system isn't working for me and I
Right.
need to change. And there is this dysfunction because it no longer aligns with my values and what I want in my life.
It's powerful.
It is.
It is.
It's really interesting to think about it from that perspective.
And it's amazing to think that all of that is very complex.
Yeah.
Like our just the system within ourself is complex. Now imagine that on an organizational level.
You're dealing with hundreds
Tens or hundreds or
of
thousands.
millions now when you add in
Yeah.
individuals and all of the systems that create who they are and what they do.
Now think about it from that context of, okay, how do you make change in that regard? Well, it's not too dissimilar. It's understanding that when you walk into an organization and you just have this feeling that this is just a dysfunctional organization,
Mm,
nobody's communicating very well with each other, or if at all. There's a high level of toxicity in terms of how people approach things and how authority leads, and how about high turnover rate, poor customer service.
mhm,
Well, if you really think about it, somebody is benefiting from that system. And it might just be as simple as, I don't want to take care of the hard stuff. It might just be, I'm happy with the way things are currently because I don't want to deal with the tough challenges of making a better customer service result for our customers. It may be addressing the, maybe we have a high turnover rate because management is protecting their jobs from having people be promoted, and they think that their jobs are on the line if they actually stay and develop their talent. Maybe there's a communication issue because there's been mistrust in the past between management and frontline workers, or between departments, and that's just a rift that's never healed. Think about that, and then you're like, whoa, this is actually serving, so whether they're aware of it or not. They may not be fully
mm.
aware that it's serving them, but it may be serving somebody, usually somebody in authority, but or even somebody who has informal authority. You just don't know. And so once you figure out and use that mindset shift to realize that, this is a way of looking at it that has some tangible ways you can find a result to change that. That's huge.
Yeah, I think though it's really hard to get people to sometimes want to change because depending on who the system is benefiting, why would they want to
Mm,
change? When you've got a culture, let's say, I mean, let's use corporate America,
right.
whatever that looks like, right? Corporate America is the bad guy in a lot of cases where they don't really care about the employee and they make decisions that are best for their bottom line and everyone is dispensable. And so there's all of these things. At some point, though, no matter where you string on one of those topics, it all comes back to someone within the corporation
Or multiple people.
or multiple people are benefiting from that being the policy.
Right. And what they don't realize is that the potential for danger down the road uh, is what's going to eventually do them in some way, shape, or form, whether it be the entire company collapses, whether it be a merger, whether it be a loss in share of the stock, whether it be loss in revenue. I mean, it's just not sustainable unless you adapt and change and do the things that best serve the entire organization, as well as the best service to your customers too. You
Yeah.
notice there's a correlation between high quality of service to the customers and a high quality of life with an organization as well. For whatever reason that is, there's something about a high quality place that people work and a high quality of service. I know correlation doesn't guarantee causation, but there's a lot of examples of that you can emulate, and ultimately it makes a better product for both the employee and the customer.
So how do people who recognize that the system is not working from that for them and they might not necessarily be in control of that system,
Right.
what do they do?
From the organizational standpoint,
From the individual standpoint.
sorry. So from the individual standpoint, it really starts with self-awareness, and what can they do is really start to take apart, like, the who is it serving? Is it serving a part of me that I actually value?
Hmm.
Or is this something that I am doing because it's making me more comfortable to not think about it, or it's serving some inner part of me that's really crying out for help?
Well,
Right?
what if it's not though? That's the thing. Like, I think a lot of people, like, let's take for example, there was a corporation that I recently was having a conversation about, and
Mm-hmm.
they laid off an entire segment of their business and then gave the CEO a 30% raise
Right.
and bought a bunch of stock back.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So somewhere down the line, there's dysfunction. This, but impacting thousands of people's jobs,
Mm-hmm.
right? How do they have an impact on what that looks like?
If they're gone, obviously there's not a huge thing that they can do except for raise their voices up and say, hey, this is what happened within this organization. Clearly, somebody might initially think of it as dysfunction, but it served the CEO. I mean, at least in the court of public opinion, it doesn't look very good to have a
Right.
CEO make a 30% raise at the expense of, let's say, 1,000 jobs or a couple hundred jobs or even 100 jobs, right? That's just not a good look. So the court of public opinion really makes a big difference there. But to reckon with themselves, like, was it me?
Mm.
Right? Is this something that I did? Well, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was the fact that this dysfunctional organization is really just serving the benefit of the elite, the people that are at the top. I know it's a stereotype, but it exists for a reason. It might have also served another department entirely that didn't want to have to work with that particular department. If you diagnose it, you can go crazy down rabbit holes, but it does give a better idea for those inside the organization to want to make the changes to try to make it more sustainable. Whether they're at the top, the middle, wherever you might be, it's a risky business to try to do these kinds of changes, but if they want to survive, that's how you got to do it. And then sometimes you just have to cut bait and realize this is not an organization that is ready to change. They'd rather live in the gap between where they aspire to be when they say we're going to be more transparent and we want to be a great job provider and we care about the quality of life for the people and we invest in our people. Well, if they're going to live in that gap and not actually get to those aspirations that they want by doing the hard work, then that's not the company for you.
Yeah, you said it. You just said it, and you said it before. Coming back to values, if you're feeling the dysfunction, how is this aligning or not aligning with your values? And how do you then respond to that? And a lot of people will stop themselves from finding new jobs or going out there and making a change because, again, this fear of scarcity or this lack of confidence that they're feeling is holding them back from trying to find a new job or finding something that better aligns with their values. But at the end of the day, the first step is acknowledging that there is a problem. And
Yep.
then secondly is, okay, what are you going to do about it? What is your part of this?
Yeah, what's your part of the mess might just be tolerating it. A lot of people don't
Yeah.
realize that they're actually tolerating something that doesn't align with their values. And even though they may not have a direct result in what happens, but they have the ability to raise awareness around it, whether it be awareness with yourself as the individual or awareness within that organization as far as what needs to change.
Yeah. It's just so interesting. And so I mean, okay, so now let's take from the perspective of that you are somebody who can change it and you've got a
Mm-hmm.
team of people who feel that there is dysfunction, and let's say they actually do, you are a leader that encourages feedback and
Mm-hmm.
gives people a safe space to say things. You're hearing that the system isn't working from them. What do you do?
Well, let me just caveat and say that you can make a change regardless if you have the concept that anybody can be a leader. It's just whether or not it will work and whether it aligns with your values. Yes, like it may not be your direct result, but that doesn't mean that you can't put an effort in to raise the awareness to get to the people who are able to change it. To your question though, how do you take the feedback that comes through and help inspire those
Yeah.
who may not feel that there is a change in the system? Is that an
Yeah.
accurate way of
Yeah.
okay? So that's a good question. I think that inspiring them to take action requires you to have open communication and allowing that feedback to come in by building trust with your employees, being able to say, hey, listen, your feedback matters. You may not have the formal authority, quote unquote, but you do have value in what you do. And I value what you say. Building the trust to say that when they have a voice, it actually leads to something, whether it is deep consideration or at least getting feedback on, hey, I considered it, we didn't do it, but here's why, or actually going forward with it some way and saying, hey, you're absolutely right, we need to change this and start walking the talk. and start making it happen.
I think this is so interesting. I find this on in so many different facets of life where you have one person who completely disagrees with you,
Hmm.
right? Is finding fault, is finding negativity and thinks that the system in some cases is dysfunctional, right?
Right.
Bringing them in to the conversation and being transparent with them and hearing what they have to say, considering it, it is amazing how many people will like flip. And all of a sudden, they're your new best friend. And they feel like they've been included.
Yes.
And the negativity starts to subside and the conversation shifts. And even though they may say the things that
You don't want to
you
hear.
don't want to hear,
Yeah.
it is refreshing sometimes. And they almost are the ones who give you permission to change because sometimes there are some cultures where change is not widely accepted. It's not something that
No.
people want to do. But by having those voices of dissent, I really feel like they almost open the door for you then to as a leader to take the next step and say, "Okay, this clearly isn't working. What can we do differently?" And boom, now all of a sudden you've got this reason to change.
I love that. And it ties me to a point that, I'm cribbing a little bit here, but you need to protect the dissenting voices in your office because a lot of the time those voices may have a reason behind it. They may not give it right away because maybe they don't trust you as a
Yeah.
leader. And so having a one-on-one conversation can really make a difference to say, I want to know what your concerns are and what you aspire to, and finding common purpose in there somewhere, and addressing and acknowledging and validating the losses that they potentially take if there's a change you're trying to make, or keeping the status quo the way that it is. But then you bring them into the discussion table and the decision table, right? That's really what makes the difference and has people speak up. They may change their tune entirely. They may not necessarily agree with you on everything,
Right.
but you get forward progress that way to be able to find what that solution is. It gives them the ability to be more adaptable, and it gives you permission, like you said, to be more adaptable and have people agree with you, and not just have yes men and women around you that aren't challenging the way that you think.
No one said leadership was easy.
Oh
It
no,
certainly
no, no, no.
certainly is not always a fun position to be in, but the question is when you do have dysfunction at your doorstep, whether you feel it or somebody else feels it, how do you how do you embrace it? How do you look at it as an opportunity for change, for positivity, to make a difference, to make it better for others? What are you not looking at? What is your current system not supporting or considering? And how do you make it better? I mean, I think that nobody can ever fault you for trying to make things better, even if you fail and you don't succeed and but you've tried, right? Then as long as you're willing to continue to try, people can't fault you for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that black and white, but you certainly stand by your values and people respect that and you respect that. That's even more important, is that
Yeah.
the inner critic in you is not going to be that loud when you feel like your values were stood up for, even if it costs you as much as your job or whatever it might be. That's the scary thing. It's not as scary as it really is when you stand up to your values. Addressing your point, though, uh, the ability to be self aware, this is a common theme when we talk about, but how self-aware are you about the things that are causing you to be, quote, dysfunctional, and seeing what that serves? It's the same with if it's your organization or you have stake in the organization. Like, if you really care about where you work, being self-aware means not just you being self-aware and calling it out, but going to the decision and the discussion table and asking, what is the elephant in the room? What are we missing here? Why are we acting the way they are? Who is actually being served the way that we're doing this?
Mm.
That gets the ball rolling. But you know, going into how that changes is a whole nother episode or multiple episodes, but it really is a self-awareness exercise, and realizing that it is not dysfunction. It's serving something, whether you value it or not, and then you need to make the changes to ultimately figure out what serves you best in your values.
Yeah. So that's really the takeaway. When you're feeling dysfunction, whether it's personally or in a workplace, ask yourself, who is this system? serving and what needs to change in order to get a different outcome.
Exactly.